You ready?
Hi, my name
Hi.
is Thomas Johnson, and I'm the founder and CEO of Get Up and Get Fit Wellness Concierge. I'm also a C-suite advisor and investor, and you're listening to the How May I Serve You podcast, where I'm constantly on the quest to surround myself with the best coaches while learning how to better serve my executive clientele.
He's gone.
Asking them, how may I serve you? Today's show is sponsored by Get Up and Get Fit. Get Up and Get Fit will be providing students with textbooks and school supplies in Cambodia in honor of our guest today, as well as our philanthropic mission to impact at least 50,000 people per year. And today's guest is Pamela Nightingale. Pam, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are
Awesome,
you?
awesome. So Pamela Nightingale, better known as Pam, was born on December 11th, 1947 in Mesa, Arizona to Mary Julia Peterson Nightingale and Earl Nightingale. At the
Mhm.
age of 2, her family moved to Chicago, Illinois, where her father was offered a position as the voice of Sky King on the radio and as an announcer for WGN.
Mhm.
When Pam was 3 years old, her father bought an insurance agency while simultaneously working for WGN. Now, Pam attended school with her older brother David, who is 4 years her senior. And when she was 8, her father had previously purchased a sailboat, and he decided to take a 2-month vacation and take David and her sailing in the West Indies and the Caribbean.
Mhm.
Since he was going to be gone for an extended amount of time, he wrote The Strangest Secret for his insurance agency to keep them
Mhm.
motivated. He recorded 40 copies at a time.
Right.
But while they were gone, it went viral and changed millions of lives forever, including mine. including
Oh,
mine.
really? Good.
So a few months back, I reached out to Pam because I wanted to extend my gratitude for the personal growth and development that I've experienced from her father's work, The
Mhm.
Strangest Secret, which I listen to every morning. So Pam, I literally listen to The Strangest Secret every morning as part of my wellness regimen, right? And I
Yeah.
know I know you recently narrated an audiobook about your father's life, right? Entitled
Mhm.
Story of Earl Nightingale and His Strangest Secret. So now I want us to dive into the the details, right? So how was this experience for you? How was the experience to like extrapolate and put together the various experiences from your father's life?
Well, I did it because it during the pandemic had just struck,
Yeah.
and we were in lockdown. So I decided, since I had plenty of time on my hand, and I always wanted to do it because so many people had told me that he had lived the life of 10 people. And he
Mm,
truly did. Um, and he was such a wonderful father. And he was such an inspiration to me to not waste my human potential, because people would always come up to him after he'd give a speech or in public gathering, and they'd ask him, "What is your goal, Mr.
mm,
Nightingale?" And he'd say, "To prevent wasted human potential."
mm,
And he was so much fun, and he ignited in me at a very young age the desire for knowledge because it equaled freedom.
mm,
Freedom, he always said that freedom is courage. With Emerson said, Ralph Waldo Emerson
mm.
said, freedom with courage equals freedom. You can, with those two things, you
You-
can conquer almost anything.
Yes,
And
indeed.
so I was born in the United States. I was free, fairly intelligent, and I was very courageous because of the way I was raised. Before I even went to school, he told me, never follow the follower,
Mm,
don't follow trends, set them, trust no one but your family, and whatever people is doing, try to do the opposite.
mm,
And Walt Disney one time told my dad that when his company would come, he'd have all these ideas for his
uh-huh.
for the Disney Group. And he said that the ideas that everyone told them would not work were the ones he decided to work on.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. And so from a very young age, I was thinking. And when he wrote The Strangest Secret, I was only 8.
Okay.
So I didn't even know what was going on. But
Yeah.
it did change my life
Yeah.
because it opened up so much more opportunities for me.
Yes, indeed.
Even though it was kind of hard growing up in Chicago, with photographers following me around and things like that. But, they weren't called paparazzi back then. It was difficult, and it was a bit difficult when I was 9 years old. Some people tried to kidnap me from
Yeah,
school,
because
and
that
my
absolutely.
brother prevented that. You don't try to take anything from David, my older brother,
Mm,
without a good fight. And so David stopped it. But um, after that, my father felt horrible because he realized that his fame was very dangerous in some respects. But it was also great. And he was such a great man. And he thought that it was his duty to share with people how he had become successful.
yes,
And that's
indeed.
what he did. He would never ask anyone to do anything that he had already not done
Yeah.
and been
And so,
successful
he
with.
pretty much practiced what he preached. And so let's go back a little bit because I want us to have some fun here. I want us to enjoy this time. So
Right?
I know you were daddy's little girl because I
Oh,
know
yeah.
when you were 9 years old, you
Mhm.
asked your dad to buy you a pony.
Mhm.
Basically, this is something most little girls want. He actually bought you a pony, right?
Well,
So
what he had done the 2 days, 3 days before that, it was a Friday, he brought home Black Beauty, the book, Black Beauty.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I love reading, and I had read it over the weekend. So Monday morning, I asked David, I said, I want to ask Daddy I want a pony. And David said, well, Dad's weakness was the word shop and buy. My dad liked shopping a lot. And so
Yeah.
when I went up to him, I said, Daddy, I really I loved reading Black Beauty. And I said, would you please buy me a pony? Well, we went off and it took a couple of days, but he bought me Lollipop, a little pony. And then it turned out I was a natural. So after, as I grew, the horses got bigger and I showed
Yeah.
horses. And during the 60s, it was perfect for me to live at the stables virtually because that was the time of free love and everything in
Yeah.
San Francisco and all that.
Uh-huh.
And my parents really didn't want me to know about that.
Okay.
So it was great.
So
And my
there was
father loved horses too.
okay.
And he would always attend my horse shows.
Awesome, awesome. So they were basically shelter you, so that the horse kept you occupied doing the
Mhm.
whole.
In a
Um,
healthy, I was a tomboy. I
okay,
hated wearing dresses. I hated that. So it worked out perfectly for me to just, I would ride in Chicago before school in the winter, and then I'd ride after school, in the summers. And then my parents, I just virtually lived in my riding clothes. So it was
there you,
perfect.
there you go. So talk to me about your brother David, right? Because David was.
David's brilliant. David is just like my dad, very intelligent,
Mm-hmm,
very scientifically minded,
mm-hmm.
and David is though a recluse. He's very reclusive, or I'm an extrovert,
Okay,
and he's just very protected. He lives in Costa Rica now,
nice.
and he's happy. He's retired. Yeah,
Okay,
like I
cool.
am. I'm now retired. After the book, I'm enjoying this too. But
Congratulations.
David's very brilliant. He graduated from the University of Illinois, as I
Mm-hmm.
did, in English. And then he went to India to work with Sister Mary, Teresa.
Oh wow.
And it's a great experience for him. But David is brilliant, like my father.
Awesome.
Whereas I'm more of a social butterfly, but I have a great memory like my father.
And you
And
also were an incredible chef as well, right?
oh
Because
yeah,
you talked
I
about
got the
that.
cookies after college. I went to I went to a 2-year college for advanced equitation,
Yes.
and I brought my stallion hot fudge with me. And then after that, I went to Paris for cooking school. My father, as far as education would go, he would pay for anything
Yeah, yeah.
because education him was primary.
Yeah, because in
The,
the book you covered that he read. I mean, this was extremely fascinating. I don't want to give away too many gems, but I have to cover this, right?
Mhm.
So in the book you mentioned that he read all the book in this one library. That's amazing.
No, I didn't read all of them. My dad did, though. My
Yeah,
father,
your dad, yeah.
yeah, he had an amazing capacity. He had a photographic, and then he had he had a fabulous way of recording everything in his brain,
Mm-hmm.
and then he could just rattle things off. He was an excellent conversationalist
Mm.
because the most important thing in conversation is to be a good listener,
Yes, indeed.
and he was that. But he also loved to talk, and he had such a marvelous voice growing up that when I was a little girl, and he would come home, late, and the minute I heard his voice, I could go to sleep because I knew my dad was home. He was a very powerful
Yes.
power person, and mentally, and he had this, uh, he emitted a strength about him,
A
and it
presence.
was so a positive presence about him that he drew people to him. I remember, I would travel with him due to his disease, acromegaly,
Yeah.
and people would come up to me after the speech, and people would say to me, there could be 8, 10,000 people there, and people would come up to me, and they'd say, I felt as though your father was talking directly to me, and he had that ability,
Mm.
and he was so positive, and it just drew people to him. And
Yeah.
I miss him extremely horribly. He was just a force in my life that I'm blessed that I had, and I'm very grateful. And that's why I wrote the book. I did the book because I wanted people to know what it was like with him.
Yeah.
And he was just he had a great deal of integrity, that was so high that he just was a marvelous man. But he loved, as much as that man worked, he loved to party too.
Yeah.
And he was a party waiting to happen. Let's say that.
Yeah. So it's funny because all these years of me listening to The Strangest Secret, I never really knew who your father was. I knew his work, right? But I
Mhm.
never really knew who he was. So what you did with creating that culture,
Wait a second.
no worries.
This is my dog. Hold on a second.
No worries.
I'm sorry. Yes.
No
Um,
worries. Yeah, so
and
I was
when
saying,
when he was a child,
hmm
he was 12 when a great earthquake hit LA.
hmm
And then my grandfather Nightingale, whom I've never met in my whole life, he left the family, and then my grandmother Nightingale moved the family into Tent City. They were very, very poor. And my father had a paper route, and he noticed on his paperwork, he was very observant, even as a child. He noticed that there were the haves and the have nots,
true.
and that the haves were happier because they had more choices, more
Mm.
freedom. And then when he was 17, he joined the Marines. And then when he was 20, Pearl Harbor hit, and the Arizona, which he fortunately was one of 15 Marines that survived that day.
Yeah.
And then after the Marine, and then he went to Camp Lejeune and trained, which are today called Navy SEALs.
Yeah.
And then he went, and then he was discharged honorably from the Marines. And then he loved the radio business, so he worked as a Marine when he was on, during World War II. He was a radio announcer for the Marines, and then he went up. Then he got back into it in Mesa, Arizona, before I was even born.
Yeah.
And then he decided that Chicago was the hub, and that's where he wanted to go. And so the first people that hired him were CBS, and he did Sky King,
Yeah.
and then he opened a insurance business, and that was simultaneously that
Yeah.
he was doing. And then he became an announcer for WAGN. And then after The Strangest Secret, he had an epiphany. He knew that he wanted to help people, to motivate people to prevent wasted human potential.
Yes,
And
indeed.
that's what he devoted his life to.
Yeah, he did it in a very, very amazing way. So let's talk about your mother, right? Because I know when your father met your mother, he knew that she had a rheumatic fever as a
He had
child.
rheumatic fever as a
Yeah, as a
child.
child. That's just damaged her heart. So, and he still
And
married her regardless.
yeah, she had a lot of heart damage from that. But it was such a beautiful love story. He loved her so much that he didn't care because he knew he would take good care of her.
Yeah.
And she could never come to my horse shows because, if I had fallen, she would faint and it could, be very bad for her. And she couldn't come with us on that cruise for that 8-week cruise that we took on the Odyssey, my dad's sailboat, because she had a problem. Dad couldn't have helped her. So he took very, very good care of her. And then, she passed away when I was 16, but she was not supposed to live past even 20, and she was 43. She died in her sleep.
It's peaceful.
And because my dad was a bit naughty, she divorced him.
Yeah.
Because, my dad liked women a lot, like way a lot. And so they got a divorce. And then, like a year after that, she passed away. And I miss her every day. But she was a lady from a very refined family in Mesa, Arizona, the Peterson family. And she was just beautiful, elegant. She was Danish. And my father's, English from Kensington, England. And she had beautiful red hair and green eyes. My dad was a blonde with blue, so I got the blonde hair, the green eyes. And she was just marvelous woman. I miss her.
Yeah, and I know you got your tenacity from your mother.
And my dad. I'm the type of person that I'm not the kind of person that is shy at all. I'm not very shy. I like talking and being with people. And so my father and I got along perfectly.
Yeah, awesome.
And I got his humor, his sense of humor. He got mine. And he loved horses. And I'm an extrovert. He was. And we just got along perfectly. So during his bad health, when I was a freshman in college, he started getting bad headaches. Very bad, like extremely bad. And then he was diagnosed with acromegaly, which is giantism. So my dad became a big guy. And Tony Robbins has the same illness.
Yeah.
So he's also a big guy, very big. So I traveled with him, and we had a great time.
And I know you definitely you assisted your father tremendously during this time, because when he was going to various events, you would accompany him. So tell me about that experience.
Oh, it was fabulous. It was just wonderful because he was so much fun to be with, and so educational to be with him.
Yeah.
And we just had a great time. I think my first big tour with him was in South Africa, which was a fabulous place. And he spoke in Johannesburg, Pretoria, Durban, Cape Town, and about 4 of the places. And it was a beautiful, wonderful experience. It's so beautiful that you have no idea. And the people are just marvelous. We had a very wonderful time. And we were there about 3 months, and we were supposed to be there longer. But my dad had a brain tumor headache.
Okay.
So we had to fly home to Gainesville because a friend of his at the Gainesville Teaching Hospital had invented microsurgery. And all his brain tumors were benign. So they would just go through his nostrils into his sinus cavity. And then the doctor kept saying he needed to be, he needed radiation to be on his head to prevent any more brain tumors. So finally, when Dad was about almost 58, he didn't want to have radiation because he was nervous that it would affect his voice.
Okay.
But actually, I convinced him. I said, Daddy, we can't keep doing this. And so he went in, and it improved his voice. Yeah, he had a great voice, and he wasn't a smoker. More people asked me that. Was my dad a smoker? No, he was not. That's why he just has that natural grainy sound in his voice.
Yeah, that boom.
Yeah. He did enjoy his Cuban cigars, but he wasn't like a smoker.
All right, so he wasn't a habitual smoker. Okay.
No.
So one story that I really enjoyed while while listening to the audiobook was your adventure on the boat. So when you and your boyfriend borrowed
Oh,
his boat.
that was extreme again.
Yeah, yeah. So that was a naughty moment on your part.
Oh,
So
I was
do you
very
want to share
naughty.
that?
I was only about 28 or 29, and Patrick told me, "Oh, I'm a cat. I can do this." Well, then he starts, we went out because it was stuck behind our house. But then a squall came up, and then Patrick starts asking me how to lower the sails, and I'm like, we don't have any crew with us today because the crew took time off when my father was out of town.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't know. I just know how to cook in the galley. And so we got caught under the 17th Street Causeway Bridge, broke off the main sail. And then I went home and I knew I was going to be in deep kimchi. But he didn't blame me, he blamed him.
Wow, you are definitely that shiny star in your dad's eye because you got away scot free.
Well, I tried. I had 4 days to get it fixed. So I called James Brewer, the head of Broward
Yeah.
Hauling and Shipyard in Fort Lauderdale. I said, get that sailboat fixed in 4 days. And then I said, send me the bill, and I thought I could just pay it, out of my allowance, but it wasn't ready yet. And so I
Okay.
had to tell my dad, but I made sure he had 2 good drinks before I took it.
You knew your dad well, so you're trying to butter him up before you sprung
Well, yeah,
that news upon him.
I knew that he needed a couple of drinks before I told him why the Odyssey wasn't ducked behind our house. It was kind of, couldn't hide it. It was missing. There was a
Yeah,
big space. So, no, he never got really mad at me.
yeah. You and your team did such a phenomenal job capturing the experience and basically um, painting the picture where you're able to literally put yourself in those positions, in those
Mhm.
experiences. As I was listening to the audiobook, I was laughing at times. Other times I was like, wow, this happened. And other times I had like a little teardrop, So it was a emotional roller coaster, to
Oh,
really
well,
learn.
I remember that alligator in our pool. Oh my God, that was a terrible experience too. And that was in the book, I think. And my father came out, and I just couldn't. I froze on the diving board between our house. Did you read about that one?
I definitely read about it. So you was on
Okay.
the diving board, you was frozen, and your dad, because of his situation, he couldn't reach to your rescue. So
I froze because I, I mean, really, I saw some movement out of my peripheral vision in my right eye,
mhm.
and then I looked, and this creature was just with its eyes just. I was frozen, and
how
I
big
could.
how big was this alligator? Because as a child, just like
It was no, I was in my 20s. It
20s.
was,
Okay.
Dad said it was, my father had exaggerated a bit. He said it was about 8 feet, but I didn't ask when I was unconscious when animal control arrived because the paramedics got me off the diving board and gave me an injection of something, and I went to sleep. And my dad said it was a big boy, though. It was big.
Wow.
It was not a small one. I'd say it was about 7, 8 feet, and it kept looking at me. And the eyes were like, dinosaur eyes, cat eyes.
Yeah.
And I knew how it was going to kill me.
Oh, it was gonna eat
They
you up.
roll you. They roll you to drown you, and then they feed on you for a couple of weeks. So I froze, and then afterwards, Dad had called animal control, fire department, the police came, everybody came. And then my daddy had a party while I was sleeping. So I wake up and I said, Dad, you're still in your robe. Because it was in the morning. He was very relaxed. He had called a caterer for sandwiches and booze to be direct. And so he's having this big party. Of course, I was still in my bikini when I woke up, and but he was just like that. He was just cool. He was a
Yeah.
cool dude.
It seems like after every situation, like every type of either an event either a negative event or positive event, your father would party afterwards to
He
celebrate.
could handle it. He 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 knew exactly how to deal with the situation,
Yeah,
no matter how stressful. But he did daytime drinking that day. We had a good time. It was a good time.
that's awesome,
But
right?
he could handle things. But even before a speech, he would never take a pain pill or a cocktail
Mm,
ever. But
okay,
afterwards, he would take a pain pill and have a martini. But
okay.
he was just he could handle any situation. He was a very confident person, and he could handle the situation. But afterwards, he needed to come down.
Yeah,
Especially where his children are involved. Any threat to us was very stressful
yes,
to
indeed.
him.
Yeah, because I know your father was extremely protective over his family.
Very,
You, your brother,
yeah.
his wife.
Oh, yeah. And you did not say anything in front of my father that a gentleman would not say, or you would get your front teeth knocked out.
mm, old school punishment.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to cover one other story before we wrap it up because I have such a great time having this conversation and
Oh,
so the your prom, right? Your prom when
wing,
you your prom date came to the door and your
wing.
father wasn't aware that you had a prom date and he
Mhm.
scared the living out
Well,
of
he
it. Talk
I said,
to me about
see, he would just say things. He would just hammer you with a direct question.
that. Yeah.
And when he asked Wayne if, you know, he was going to have, if he had planned to have sex with me, Wayne just almost ran out the door. But I went and got him. And my father, was just, and I said to Dad before Wayne got there, I said, if you say anything wrong, I'm
Yeah.
gonna, I'm gonna flush all your Cuban cigars and all your 30-year single malt whiskeys. But he still did it. Yeah. But we had a great time. And he really liked Wing. He really did.
So the part that really made me laugh was your date had a fishbowl and he
Mm.
dropped the fishbowl.
Well, I told him, no, he had this little fishbowl. I told him I didn't have a pitch
Yeah.
because we lived in, this high rise thing. And so he brought me a goldfish. And I got the fish picked up. And then our housekeeper came and cleaned up the mess. And I gave my dad dagger eyes, but I didn't keep that night.
The poor guy was so frightened that he dropped the fishbowl.
Well, my dad's voice is big. When
Yeah,
you're up close and personal with him, his voice is very big. And so poor Wayne, but then they got on perfectly.
that's awesome right there.
Yeah.
So Pam, what would you say will be the gem of this whole process of putting together this body of work, right? What was your
It,
experience like? Just
it
being
was good. It was very emotional.
okay.
It was extremely emotional for me because it kept bringing up my, stories when I was a child, teenagers, young adult, and my memories were so perfectly distinct. It brought me back to the full color of it all, where
Mm,
I could just see everything very clearly. And I missed him, and I missed my mother too. So it took about 2.5 years for it to be finished. I talked to you last year, and I kept saying it's coming,
yeah,
but I had to take breaks because I miss him. You know, I
yeah.
miss him a great deal.
That's
But I'm glad I did it. I'm so happy I did the book. And my mother had all these wonderful pictures that are in the paperback and in the hardback book that will be out at the end of the summer.
yeah.
And they're all in there. So you'll get to see all the great pictures.
I'm looking forward to my autographed copy of the
You will get one.
hardcover.
You will. I promise that.
Awesome, awesome. Pamela, it has been such a pleasure having this
Thank you.
conversation with you. Be able to really see you glow as you reflect on those memories, and
Mhm.
I love
Yeah.
stories, and just being able to have this conversation with you today, I'm forever grateful. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And I'm glad we connected today. And
Yes.
I'm just so sorry I had to cancel, but I was kind of out of it
No,
last
no
week.
worries. No
Okay.
worries.
Thank you so much, Thomas.
Awesome.